It was raining the day Daniel Harper lost everything. Not just money, not just his house, everything. For 40 years, Daniel had worked tirelessly building his construction company. Long days, sleepless nights, endless sacrifices. He had built homes for thousands of families across the city. But the cruel irony of life, now he didn't even have one for himself. The financial collapse had been sudden. A failed partnership, a lawsuit, debt piling up faster than he could control. Within 6 months, his company was gone. The bank took the office. The cars were repossessed. And finally, the house he had lived in for 30 years. Standing outside the empty home that final day, Daniel held a small cardboard box containing the last of his belongings. A few photographs, a watch his late wife had given him, and memories that now felt heavier than the box itself. His son Michael had insisted he move in with them. "Dad, you're not staying alone, you're coming with us." At the time it sounded comforting, but Daniel had no idea that decision would soon become the worst humiliation of his life. The rain fell steadily as Daniel stood on the sidewalk staring at the house. The same house where he had watched his son take his first steps, where birthday candles had been blown out year after year, where his wife, Margaret, had laughed in the kitchen while music played on the radio. Now the windows were dark, empty. The front door, once warm and welcoming, now looked cold and unfamiliar. A real estate agent stood beside him holding an umbrella. "Mr. Harper," the agent said gently, "the bank representatives will be here soon to change the locks." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." His voice sounded calm. Too calm? Inside, however, something felt like it had collapsed completely. He took one last look at the house. 30 years, gone in a matter of signatures and legal papers. The agent hesitated before speaking again. "I'm very sorry this happened." Daniel forced a small smile. "Life happens." He turned away before the man could see the moisture forming in his eyes. It wasn't the rain. Michael arrived 20 minutes later in a black SUV. He rushed out of the car and walked quickly toward his father. "Dad, you shouldn't be standing out here in the rain." "I'm fine," Daniel said quietly. Michael looked at the cardboard box in his father's hands. "Is that all?" Daniel glanced down at the box. "Turns out you don't need much when you lose everything." Michael didn't laugh. He simply opened the trunk of the SUV. "Put it in the back. Let's go home." Home. The word sounded strange now. Daniel placed the box carefully in the trunk and got into the passenger seat. As they drove away, he glanced at the house through the rear window. For a moment, he thought he saw Margaret standing by the front window the way she used to, waiting for him to come home after work. But it was just a reflection. The car turned the corner, and the house disappeared from view. Michael lived across the city in a wealthy suburban neighborhood. Large homes, perfect lawns, luxury cars parked neatly in wide driveways. Daniel stared quietly out the window as they drove. Michael had done well for himself. A successful financial consultant, a big house, a comfortable life. Daniel had always been proud of that. "Sarah made up the guest room for you," Michael said while driving. "She even bought new sheets." Daniel nodded. "That's kind of her." But something in Michael's tone sounded hesitant, like someone carefully choosing their words. The car eventually pulled into the driveway of a large modern house. Glass windows, stone walls, perfect landscaping. It looked more like a luxury magazine cover than a home. Daniel stepped out slowly. For a moment, he felt like a stranger standing outside someone else's life. Michael grabbed the box from the trunk. "Come on, Dad." They walked to the front door. Before Michael could unlock it, the door opened. Sarah stood there, tall, perfectly dressed, her expression polite but not warm. "Hi, Daniel," she said. "Not Dad, not Mr. Harper. Just Daniel." Michael kissed her quickly. "We got everything." Sarah's eyes moved briefly to the small box in Michael's hands. "That's all he brought?" Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't welcoming either. Daniel noticed. And so did Michael. "It's enough," Michael said quickly. Sarah stepped aside to let them in. "Well, dinner will be ready soon." The inside of the house was spotless. Modern furniture, bright lighting, everything arranged perfectly. Too perfectly. Daniel felt suddenly aware of the wet shoes on his feet. He wiped them carefully on the mat. Sarah watched the movement. "You can leave your shoes there," she said. Daniel nodded. "Of course." Michael carried the box upstairs. Daniel followed slowly, noticing the quiet. No laughter, no music, just the faint sound of dishes in the kitchen. They reached the guest room. Michael placed the box gently on the bed. "It's not much, but it's comfortable." Daniel looked around. The room was neat, minimal, almost like a hotel room, temporary. "Thank you, son," he said softly. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. "Don't thank me. You're my father." For a moment, the old warmth returned to Michael's voice, but it didn't last long. From downstairs, Sarah called out, "Michael, can you come here a second?" Michael sighed quietly. "I'll be right back, Dad." He walked downstairs. Daniel sat slowly on the edge of the bed. The house was quiet again, but not completely. Through the open hallway, faint voices drifted upward from the kitchen. At first, Daniel didn't mean to listen, but then he heard Sarah's voice clearly. "You didn't tell me it would be this permanent." Michael replied in a lower voice. "He has nowhere else to go." There was a pause. Then Sarah spoke again. "But how long is this supposed to last?" Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Michael didn't answer immediately. Finally, he said, "Just until things settle down." Sarah's voice dropped, but the sharpness remained. "I hope that soon." Silence followed. Daniel sat motionless in the guest room, staring at the small cardboard box beside him. For the first time that day, the weight of his new reality truly settled in. This wasn't his home. It never would be. And deep down, he had a feeling that his presence here was already becoming a problem. What Daniel didn't know yet was that this was only the beginning. Because in the weeks ahead, the quiet discomfort in that house would slowly turn into something far worse. Humiliation, manipulation, and a betrayal that would change everything. The fall had already happened, but the real story had just begun. Michael's home looked nothing like the modest house Daniel had lost. It was enormous. A modern luxury mansion sitting proudly in one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. The kind of neighborhood Daniel had once helped build but never imagined living in. Tall glass walls reflected the afternoon sun like mirrors. Perfectly trimmed hedges lined the driveway. Sculpted trees stood like silent guards around the property. And the driveway itself, it was filled with expensive cars. A sleek black sports car, a silver SUV that looked brand new, and another luxury sedan parked neatly beside them. Daniel stood quietly at the entrance gate, holding his old brown suitcase in one hand. The suitcase had seen better days. Its leather was worn and faded, the corners slightly cracked from years of travel. It looked painfully out of place against the polished steel gate and the spotless marble pathway leading to the house. For a moment, Daniel simply stood there. He had spent 40 years building homes for other families. Massive homes, beautiful homes, dream homes. But standing here now, he felt like a stranger in a world he had helped create. Michael opened the door before Daniel could ring the bell. "Dad!" Michael stepped outside quickly and wrapped his arms around him. For a brief moment, Daniel felt warmth again. "Dad, you're home," Michael said softly. Daniel patted his son's back. Michael was taller than him now, broader, successful. The boy he once carried on his shoulders had become a man with a mansion. "I hope I'm not a burden," Daniel said quietly. Michael immediately shook his head. "Don't say that, you're my father." But before Daniel could respond, he noticed someone standing just behind Michael in the doorway. Victoria, Michael's wife. She stood with her arms folded lightly across her chest, leaning slightly against the polished doorframe. She was elegant, perfectly dressed, even for a normal afternoon at home. Her dark hair was styled neatly and her makeup looked flawless. On the surface, she looked welcoming, but something in her eyes felt different. Cold, sharp, calculating. Michael stepped aside slightly. "Victoria, Dad's here." Victoria slowly walked forward. A polite smile appeared on her face, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello, Daniel," she said. "Not Dad, not Father, just Daniel." Daniel noticed immediately, but he pretended not to. After all, this wasn't his house anymore. He was just a guest. "Hello, Victoria," Daniel replied politely. There was a brief silence between them, the kind of silence that feels heavier than words. Victoria glanced down at Daniel's suitcase, then quickly looked away. "Well," she said calmly, "come inside." Daniel stepped into the house, and for a moment, he felt like he had walked into a luxury hotel. The floors were polished marble, shining so brightly they almost reflected the ceiling lights like water. A massive chandelier hung from above, sparkling with hundreds of crystals. Modern paintings decorated the walls. Large glass windows stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Daniel couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. Someone had built this place with incredible precision. He noticed the corners of the walls, the structure of the staircase, the seamless joints between the marble tiles. A builder's eyes never stopped noticing details. "Beautiful house," Daniel said quietly. Michael smiled. "Thanks, Dad. Took a few years to get here." Victoria walked ahead of them, her heels tapping sharply against the marble floor. "This way," she said. She led them through the living room. Everything looked untouched. White couches that looked too perfect to sit on. Glass tables with decorative books arranged carefully. Fresh flowers placed exactly in the center. It felt less like a home and more like a showroom. Daniel moved carefully, almost afraid he might accidentally break something. They reached a hallway near the back of the house. Victoria stopped at a door and opened it. "This will be your room," she said. Daniel stepped inside. The room was smaller than the rest of the house but still comfortable. A simple bed, a small dresser, a window that looked out toward the backyard. But compared to the rest of the mansion, it felt like the servants' quarters. Daniel placed his suitcase beside the bed. "It's perfect," he said. Michael looked around the room, almost as if noticing it properly for the first time. "Dad, if you need anything—" "I won't," Daniel interrupted gently. "I won't be any trouble." Victoria leaned against the doorframe again. "That would be appreciated," she said calmly. Michael shot her a quick glance, but Victoria only smiled sweetly. "Dinner is usually at 7, she continued. "Michael works late most days, but the household runs on a schedule." Daniel nodded. "Of course." Victoria's eyes studied him again, measuring him, evaluating him, like someone assessing an unexpected problem. "Well," she said finally, "make yourself comfortable." She turned and walked away without another word. Her heels echoed down the hallway. Michael sighed quietly. "Don't mind her," he said. Daniel gave a small smile. "I've lived long enough to understand people." Michael looked at him carefully. "You sure you're okay?" Daniel nodded. "I lost my house, my company, and half my savings in 1 week." He paused. "Compared to that, a small room is nothing." Michael placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "You'll get back on your feet, I promise." Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the window. Outside, the backyard stretched wide and perfect. A swimming pool shimmered under the sunlight. Lounge chairs sat neatly arranged beside it. Everything looked peaceful, perfect. But Daniel had built enough houses in his life to understand something important. The most beautiful houses sometimes hide the ugliest problems inside. And as he stood there looking out at the quiet luxury surrounding him, Daniel couldn't shake the strange feeling that he wasn't truly welcome here. Not really. And somewhere in the house, Victoria was already thinking the same thing. The first dinner together felt strange. Victoria had prepared an elegant meal, but the atmosphere felt colder than the marble floor beneath them. The dining room itself was beautiful. High ceilings, crystal lights hanging above the long table, soft golden lamps glowing against polished white walls. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Daniel sat quietly at the far end of the table, feeling like a guest in a place that was supposed to feel like family. Victoria moved gracefully between the kitchen and the table, placing dishes down with careful precision. Roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, a bowl of pasta, a bottle of expensive wine. She had clearly gone through effort, but something about it felt less like hospitality and more like performance. Michael tried to make conversation. "Dad used to run one of the biggest construction companies in the city." Victoria gave a small smile. "Used to," the word hung in the air like an insult. Daniel slowly lifted his fork but said nothing. Michael cleared his throat. "Yeah, well, things changed." Victoria tilted her head slightly, pretending curiosity. "Oh, I didn't realize it ended so suddenly." Daniel quietly continued eating. The chicken was tender, the vegetables perfectly seasoned, but he could barely taste any of it. His mind was too busy replaying the last few months of his life. 40 years of building something meaningful, gone in a matter of weeks. A failed partnership, legal battles, a flood of debts that swallowed everything he had built, even his home. Daniel forced himself back to the present. Victoria spoke again. "Well, I suppose retirement came early." Michael quickly changed the topic. "So, Dad, how was the drive here today?" Daniel nodded slightly. "It was fine." Victoria took a sip of wine and leaned back in her chair. "You must find this house different." Daniel looked up. "What do you mean?" Victoria gestured around the dining room. "It's not exactly the kind of home you're used to." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria," but she continued speaking. "I mean, construction work is respectable and all, but this neighborhood is a bit more corporate." The message was clear. Daniel said nothing. He had spent decades building luxury homes bigger than this one. Homes with private theaters, indoor pools, and skyline views. But tonight, explaining that felt pointless. Michael forced a small laugh. "Dad built half the luxury homes in the city." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" Daniel nodded calmly. "Some of them." Victoria smiled again, but the smile never reached her eyes. "That's impressive." Her tone suggested the opposite. There was a long silence. The sound of forks touching plates filled the room. Daniel watched Victoria carefully. She never looked directly at him. Every time he glanced up, her eyes moved elsewhere. At Michael, at her wine glass, at the table decorations, as if he were invisible, or worse, unwanted. After a few moments, Victoria stood up and began collecting plates. "You must be tired, Daniel." The way she said his name felt deliberate. Not Dad. Not Mr. Harper, just Daniel, like he was a stranger. Michael stood up quickly. "I'll help you." They both carried dishes to the kitchen. Daniel remained seated. From where he sat, he could hear their voices faintly. Victoria whispered something. Michael responded quietly. The conversation was too soft to understand, but the tone was clear. Tense. Daniel leaned back slightly and looked around the room again. The house was enormous. Minimalist design, cold white walls. Expensive furniture arranged perfectly. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a showroom. Footsteps approached. Michael returned with 2 glasses of water. He placed one in front of Daniel. "You okay, Dad?" Daniel nodded. "I'm fine." Michael sat across from him. "I know this is an adjustment." Daniel looked at his son carefully. "When did you buy this place?" "About 2 years ago. Nice neighborhood." Michael smiled a little. "Victoria loves it." Daniel nodded slowly. He already knew that. Victoria re-entered the room, drying her hands with a towel. She sat back down and crossed her legs. "So Daniel, what are your plans now?" Michael looked uncomfortable again. "What kind of question is that?" Victoria shrugged. "I'm just curious." Daniel answered calmly. "For now, I'm just trying to settle in." Victoria studied him for a moment. "You plan to stay long?" The question sounded polite. But it didn't feel polite. Michael immediately spoke up. "Of course he is." Victoria looked at him. "I'm only asking." Daniel remained calm. "I won't be a burden." Victoria quickly raised her hands. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." But Daniel noticed something again. That small smile. The one that appeared whenever she said something sharp. The one that suggested she enjoyed pushing boundaries. Michael stood up suddenly. "Let's move to the living room." Victoria nodded. "Good idea." They walked into the spacious living room where a large glass wall overlooked the city lights. Daniel paused near the window. The skyline stretched endlessly across the horizon. He had once helped build parts of that skyline. Michael sat on the couch. Victoria took the armchair. Daniel remained standing for a moment before slowly sitting down. Another silence filled the room. Victoria checked her phone briefly. Then she looked up. "You know, it's interesting." Michael sighed. "Victoria," but she continued, "I've just never lived with someone who retired unexpectedly." Daniel met her eyes for the first time that night. And for a brief moment, she didn't look away. The tension in the room thickened. Daniel spoke quietly. "Life has a way of surprising you." Victoria leaned back. "I suppose it does." Another pause. Michael rubbed his forehead. "I think we should all get some rest." Victoria stood up. "Yes, long day." She walked toward the hallway. Halfway there, she stopped. And without turning around, she said calmly, "We'll figure out the living arrangements tomorrow." Daniel noticed the words carefully. "Living arrangements? Not your room, not your stay, just arrangements." Victoria disappeared down the hallway. Michael looked apologetically at his father. "She just needs time." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand." But deep down, he already understood something else. This house might belong to his son, but it did not belong to him, and Victoria had already made that very clear. The humiliations didn't happen all at once. They came slowly, quietly, like drops of water slowly eroding stone. First, Victoria moved Daniel into the smallest room in the house, a former storage room, no windows, barely enough space for a bed. The walls were painted an old shade of beige that had faded unevenly over time. When Daniel first stepped inside, he noticed the faint outline of shelves that had once been mounted there. The room still smelled slightly of cardboard and dust. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said casually. "All the other rooms are already decorated." Daniel nodded. He told himself it made sense. After all, it was their house now. Victoria and Michael had spent months renovating it before moving in. Every room had a purpose, she explained. The guest room was now Michael's office. The upstairs room had been turned into a workout space. "This will just be temporary," she added with a polite smile. Temporary. Daniel repeated the word in his mind as he placed his small suitcase on the narrow bed. Then came the rules. At first, they sounded like simple household requests. Please don't use the living room television during the day. Please eat after Michael leaves for work. Please don't answer the door. Victoria always delivered them in the same tone, soft, polite, almost apologetic. But they kept coming. Please try not to leave your shoes by the entrance. Please keep your door closed. Please avoid using the kitchen while I'm hosting guests. Daniel tried to follow every rule carefully. He folded his clothes neatly inside the single drawer provided. He kept his phone on silent. He even adjusted his schedule so he would wake earlier and finish breakfast before Michael came downstairs. At first, Daniel thought he might be overthinking it. Maybe Victoria just liked order. Some people did, but the message was becoming clearer each day. This house had space, just not for him. One morning, Daniel walked quietly into the kitchen, hoping to make tea. Sunlight poured through the wide windows above the sink. The kitchen itself was enormous: granite counters, polished cabinets, and a large wooden island in the center. Victoria was already there, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when she heard him. "Oh," she said lightly, "you're up early." "Just making tea," Daniel replied. He reached for the kettle. Victoria hesitated for a moment. "Actually," she said, "could you maybe wait a bit? I'm about to prepare breakfast for Michael." Daniel paused. The kettle was already in his hand. "Oh, sure," he said quietly. He placed it back on the counter and stepped away. Victoria smiled politely. "Thank you." Daniel returned to his room. The storage room felt smaller each day. Without windows, it was impossible to tell whether the sun had risen or set unless he checked his phone. The single overhead light cast a pale yellow glow that made the walls feel even closer. He sat on the edge of the bed. For a long moment, he simply stared at the door. He tried to remind himself why he was here. Michael had insisted. "Stay with us for a while," his brother had said over the phone months earlier. "You shouldn't be alone right now." At the time, Daniel had been grateful, but Michael was rarely home. His job kept him busy. Long hours, late meetings, business trips. Most days he left before sunrise and returned well after dinner. Victoria ran the household, and she ran it with quiet precision. That afternoon, Daniel heard laughter coming from the living room. Women's voices. Victoria must have been hosting friends again. Daniel remained inside his room, sitting on the bed with a book he wasn't really reading. The walls were thin, and he could hear fragments of conversation drifting down the hallway. "He's staying here for now." A pause, then a softer voice. "Oh, I didn't realize." Victoria laughed lightly. "It's just temporary." Daniel closed the book. He wasn't sure why those words bothered him more this time. Temporary. The word had started to feel like something else. Later that evening, Daniel stepped out of his room to get water. The house was quiet now. The guests had left, and the lights in the living room were dim. As he passed through the hallway, he noticed something on the dining table, a small stack of framed photographs. Victoria must have been rearranging them earlier. Daniel stopped. One photo caught his attention. It showed Michael and Victoria standing in front of the house on the day they moved in. Both were smiling brightly, arms around each other. Behind them, the house looked warm and welcoming, full of light. Daniel studied the image for a moment. There were no signs of tension, no small rules, no invisible lines dividing the space, just a happy couple in front of a beautiful home. Daniel gently placed the photograph back where he found it. Then he walked to the kitchen and filled a glass with water. As he turned to leave, he noticed something new on the refrigerator, a small whiteboard. Victoria often used it to write reminders or grocery lists. Tonight, there was a short note written neatly in blue marker. House Guidelines 1, Kitchen Access after 9 a.m. 2, Living Room reserved during daytime 3, Please inform before inviting visitors 4, Keep personal items inside your room. Daniel stared at the list. The handwriting was neat and careful, and at the bottom of the board there was one final line. Thank you for respecting the home. Daniel stood there for a long moment. Then he quietly placed the glass in the sink and returned to his room. He closed the door behind him. Inside, the storage room felt just as it had on the first day, small, silent, and slightly too warm. Daniel sat on the bed again. The house was peaceful. Victoria's footsteps moved softly upstairs. A door closed somewhere in the distance. Everything felt normal. Everything looked normal. But Daniel understood something now. The humiliations were not loud. They didn't come with shouting or anger. They came wrapped in politeness, in smiles, in small requests that sounded reasonable on their own. But together, they built something else, something quiet, something heavy. Daniel leaned back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. This house had space, plenty of it, large rooms, wide windows, empty corners, yet somehow, day by day, it seemed to be shrinking around him. What hurt Daniel the most was not Victoria, it was Michael, his own son. Michael saw the situation. He heard the comments. He noticed the small humiliations, but he never said anything, never defended him, never challenged his wife. Instead, Michael would simply say things like, "Dad, Victoria just likes things organized," or "Please try to understand her perspective." Daniel did understand, more than they realized. He understood that he had become something shameful, a reminder of failure, and people like Victoria didn't like reminders. Michael had always been a quiet child. Even when he was young, he rarely argued. If something upset him, he would simply retreat into silence. Daniel used to think that meant Michael was patient, thoughtful. Now he wondered if it had simply meant Michael preferred avoiding conflict. One evening, Michael returned home earlier than usual. Daniel could hear the familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway. The engine stopped, the car door closed, and a moment later the front door opened. Daniel stepped out of his small room. "Michael," he said. His son looked tired. His tie hung loosely around his neck, and his briefcase was still in his hand. "Hey, Dad." For a moment, Daniel felt a small sense of relief. It had been days since they had spoken properly. "How was work?" Daniel asked. "Busy," Michael replied with a short sigh. Victoria appeared from the kitchen. "Dinner will be ready soon," she said. Michael nodded gratefully and kissed her on the cheek. Then he noticed Daniel still standing in the hallway. "Oh, Dad," he added casually, "did you see the note Victoria left on the fridge?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes," he said. Michael nodded as if confirming something reasonable. "It just helps keep things smooth around here." Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he simply gave a small nod and returned to his room. That night, the three of them ate dinner together. It didn't happen often. Usually, Victoria preferred that Daniel eat later, after Michael had finished. But tonight, she seemed unusually relaxed. The dining table was large, polished wood that reflected the warm light hanging above it. Victoria spoke about her day. She mentioned grocery shopping, a yoga class, and a friend who was planning to visit next week. Michael listened, occasionally adding a comment. Daniel mostly stayed quiet. At one point, Victoria turned to him with a polite smile. "Daniel, would you mind using the smaller plate next time?" she asked. Daniel looked down at his dish. "I'm sorry," he said. "The dinner plates are part of a matching set," she explained gently. "I like to keep them looking nice for guests." Daniel slowly placed his fork down. "Of course," he said. Michael shifted slightly in his seat but said nothing. The conversation quickly returned to Victoria's plans for the weekend. Daniel finished his meal quietly. Later that night, Michael knocked on Daniel's door. The knock was soft, almost hesitant. "Dad, come in," Daniel replied. Michael stepped inside the small room and looked around for a moment. It was clear he hadn't spent much time here. The overhead light made the space look even smaller. "You settling in okay?" Michael asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "As well as I can in a storage room." Michael gave an awkward laugh. "It's not really a storage room anymore." Daniel didn't respond. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Michael rubbed the back of his neck. Victoria just likes the house a certain way, he said again. Daniel looked at him carefully. I know. She's not trying to be mean, Michael continued. She just likes structure. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, I've noticed. Michael seemed relieved that Daniel wasn't arguing. You know how things are, he added. Marriage requires compromise. Daniel studied his son's face. Michael looked sincere. He truly believed what he was saying. And that somehow made it worse. Michael, Daniel said gently, do you think I make her uncomfortable? Michael hesitated. The pause lasted only a few seconds, but it was long enough. I think it's just an adjustment, he said. Daniel nodded. I see. Michael glanced toward the door. Well, I should get some sleep. Early meeting tomorrow. Of course, Daniel replied. Michael gave him a quick pat on the shoulder before leaving. The door closed softly behind him. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. The silence of the room pressed against him. It wasn't anger he felt. Not exactly. It was something quieter, a slow understanding. Michael wasn't cruel. He wasn't heartless. He was simply unwilling to create tension in his marriage, unwilling to challenge the small rules that had slowly taken shape in the house. And so the easiest solution had been silence. Daniel leaned back against the wall. Memories drifted through his mind. Michael as a child, running through the backyard with scraped knees. Michael learning to ride a bicycle. Michael nervously preparing for his first job interview. Back then, Daniel had always been the one standing behind him, encouraging him, protecting him. Now the roles had quietly changed, and Daniel had discovered something unexpected. Not all silence is peaceful. Some silence is simply surrender. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He moved quietly through the hallway and into the kitchen. The house was still dark, and the sun had only begun to rise. He made himself a cup of tea and sat at the dining table. For a brief moment, the house felt calm, peaceful. Then Victoria entered the room. She looked slightly surprised to see him there. Oh, she said. You're up? Yes, she glanced at the clock. It's a bit early for the kitchen. Daniel looked at the tea in his hands. I'll be finished soon. Victoria didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked to the refrigerator and looked at the whiteboard. Her finger tapped the list gently. Rules help everyone live comfortably, she said. Daniel nodded. Yes, they do. Victoria gave him a small smile. Then she turned and left the room. Daniel finished his tea in silence. As he placed the cup in the sink, he noticed Michael standing in the doorway. His son had heard the conversation. Their eyes met for a moment. Michael opened his mouth slightly, as if about to say something. But then he stopped. And after a brief pause, he simply said, "Morning, Dad." Daniel nodded. "Good morning." Michael walked into the kitchen and began preparing coffee. The moment passed, just like all the others. Quiet, unspoken, and somehow heavier each time. One evening, Victoria hosted a dinner party. The house looked different when she entertained guests. Lights glowed warmly in every room. Soft music played from hidden speakers. The dining table was decorated with polished silverware, crystal glasses, and a long arrangement of white flowers stretching across the center. Wealthy guests filled the house. Business owners, investors, socialites. Their voices drifted through the hallway in smooth, confident tones. Laughter came easily to them, light, practiced laughter that sounded more like a performance than genuine amusement. Daniel stayed quietly in his room. He had learned that it was better that way. When Victoria hosted guests, the unspoken rule was simple: stay out of sight. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the distant sounds of conversation and clinking glasses. Every so often, he could hear Victoria's voice rising slightly above the others. Graceful, controlled, perfectly charming. She was good at hosting. Very good. From his small, windowless room, Daniel imagined the scene upstairs. The guests standing in small circles, holding glasses of wine. Victoria moving effortlessly among them, smiling, laughing, guiding conversations like a conductor leading an orchestra. Michael was probably near the dining table, discussing business. He had always been good at that too. For a moment, Daniel considered simply staying where he was all night. Then came a knock on the door. It was quick, gentle. "Dad," Daniel looked up. Michael stood in the doorway. "Dad, come join us." Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Of course," Michael said. "You shouldn't stay hidden in here all night." Hidden. The word lingered in Daniel's mind. Still, he stood up slowly. "All right," he said. When Daniel stepped into the dining room, the conversation stopped. Not abruptly, not dramatically, but just enough for him to notice. The room was filled with people dressed in expensive suits and elegant dresses. The table was surrounded by polished chairs, and every seat was already occupied. Victoria stood near the head of the table, holding a glass of wine. When she saw Daniel enter, her smile appeared instantly. But Daniel noticed something subtle in her eyes, a flicker of surprise, maybe even irritation. "Everyone," she said smoothly, raising her voice slightly. "This is Daniel, Michael's father." Several guests nodded politely. A few offered friendly smiles. Daniel gave a small nod in return. One of the men at the table leaned back slightly in his chair. He was middle-aged, wearing a dark suit with a gold watch that caught the light. "Oh," the man said pleasantly. "What do you do?" The question was simple. "Normal." Daniel opened his mouth to answer. Before he could speak, Victoria laughed softly. "He used to be in construction," she said lightly. "But he's retired now." Retired. The word floated across the table like a carefully placed decoration. Daniel closed his mouth. Several guests nodded politely. "Construction is tough work," one woman said. "Yes," another guest added. "Very demanding." Victoria raised her wine glass slightly. These days, Daniel is enjoying a very relaxed lifestyle. There was a small pause. Then the table laughed politely. It wasn't loud laughter. It was the kind of laughter people give when they're not entirely sure if something is meant to be funny, but they laugh anyway. Daniel heard it clearly. Not the sound, the meaning. Relaxed lifestyle. It was a gentle way of saying something else. Unproductive, unimportant, finished. Daniel forced a small smile. Michael shifted slightly in his seat but didn't say anything. Victoria gestured toward an empty chair near the end of the table. "Please, Daniel, sit." Daniel sat down quietly. Dinner continued. The conversation quickly returned to business and investments. One man spoke about a new real estate development project. Another described a recent trip to Europe. Someone else discussed stock markets and rising property values. Daniel listened quietly. Occasionally, someone asked him a polite question. "Do you like living in the city? How long have you been retired? Do you travel much?" Each time, Victoria answered before he could. "Oh, Daniel prefers a simple life. He's not really interested in traveling. He mostly enjoys quiet hobbies." Daniel noticed the pattern. Each response made him smaller, simpler, harmless, like a piece of furniture that happened to sit at the table. At one point, a woman across from him smiled kindly. "You must be very proud of Michael," she said. Daniel looked at his son. Michael was discussing business with two guests beside him, barely noticing the conversation. "Yes," Daniel said softly, "I am." As the evening went on, the wine flowed more freely. The laughter at the table grew louder. Stories became exaggerated. Victoria seemed completely in control of the room. She told amusing stories, complimented her guests, and moved conversations effortlessly from one topic to another. At one point, she placed a hand lightly on Michael's shoulder. "We're very lucky," she said. "Michael works incredibly hard to provide this life." Several guests nodded in agreement. Someone raised their glass. "To success! To success!" the others echoed. Glasses clinked together. Daniel lifted his water glass quietly. No one noticed. Later, as dessert was served, one of the guests turned toward Daniel again. "So Daniel," the man said, smiling politely. "Do you miss working?" Daniel paused. For the first time that evening, Victoria didn't interrupt. The table grew slightly quieter. Daniel thought about the years he had spent building houses. Long days under the sun, the smell of wood and concrete, the satisfaction of watching a structure rise slowly from the ground. He thought about the pride he used to feel. "Yes," Daniel said simply. "I do." The answer was honest, but it didn't seem to interest anyone. The conversation quickly shifted back to investments. When the dinner party finally ended, the guests began leaving one by one. Coats were gathered. Polite goodbyes were exchanged. Victoria stood by the door, thanking everyone for coming. "You must visit again soon," she said warmly. The house slowly returned to silence. Daniel slipped quietly out of the dining room and walked back down the hallway. No one stopped him. No one noticed. He returned to his small room and closed the door behind him. The silence inside felt heavier than usual. After a few minutes, he sat down on the bed. From somewhere upstairs, he could hear Victoria and Michael talking. Their voices were cheerful, relieved. "Everything went perfectly," Victoria said. Daniel leaned back against the wall and stared at the ceiling. He replayed the evening in his mind. The introductions, the laughter, the word retired, the polite smiles. It had been a successful dinner party. The guests had been entertained. The house had looked beautiful. Everything had gone exactly the way Victoria planned. Daniel understood something now. Tonight had not been an accident, it had been a performance. And his role in it had been very simple. He wasn't a guest, he wasn't family. At that table, surrounded by wealth and success, he had been something else entirely. A quiet reminder of the kind of life those people believed they had left behind. And reminders like that were only useful when they could also be laughed at. Over the next few days, Daniel began noticing strange things. At first, they were small details, the kind most people might ignore, but Daniel had spent a lifetime paying attention to details. In construction, small things mattered. A weak beam, a hairline crack, a measurement slightly off. Small problems often meant bigger ones hidden underneath. And now, inside Michael's house, Daniel was starting to see the same pattern. Victoria often whispered on the phone late at night. Her voice carried faintly through the hallway when the house was quiet. Daniel would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and hear her pacing slowly across the living room floor. Her tone was different during those calls. Lower, sharper, careful. Sometimes she spoke so softly that Daniel couldn't hear the words. Other times, short fragments drifted down the hallway. "No, not yet. That's too risky. We'll discuss it tomorrow." The conversations always ended the same way. Quickly, abruptly, as if she didn't want them to last too long. Daniel tried not to think too much about it, but then he began noticing something else. Victoria frequently argued with Michael behind closed doors. It didn't happen during the day, only at night. The walls in the house were thick, but voices sometimes carried through the hallway when the arguments became louder. Daniel never heard the entire conversations, only pieces. "You promised. You don't understand the pressure. We cannot keep delaying this." Then silence, heavy silence. The kind that follows words people wish they hadn't said. One evening, Daniel was walking quietly toward the kitchen when he heard something that made him stop. Victoria's voice, sharp, frustrated. "We cannot afford mistakes right now." Daniel froze in the hallway. "Mistakes? What mistakes?" There was a pause before Michael answered. His voice was lower, harder to hear. "I know," he said. Then the door closed. The conversation ended, but the words stayed in Daniel's mind. Mistakes. The word sounded heavier than it should have. Another night, Daniel noticed something even stranger. He had stepped into the hallway to get a glass of water when he saw headlights through the front window. A black car was parked outside. A man in a dark suit stood near the door. "I'm running late," he added. "We'll talk later." "Late-night business meetings?" Daniel asked gently. "Michael," Daniel said carefully. "Oh," Michael said quickly, "just business stuff." "Sometimes." "Who was the man that visited last night?" "Yes," and he recognized the signs. And now, standing in that quiet kitchen, Daniel felt certain of one thing. And whatever it was, at one point she handed him a folder. But Daniel knew something about buildings. But Daniel noticed. But sleep didn't come easily that night. Daniel had spent decades in business. Daniel returned to his room. Daniel slowly poured himself a cup of tea. Stayed in the hallway, pretending to read something on his phone while occasionally glancing toward the room. Daniel stood alone in the kitchen. Daniel studied his son's face. Fear. Inside, everything about the house looked perfect. He had negotiated deals, managed crews, handled financial pressure, and watched companies struggle when things began going wrong. He looked around the large kitchen. He picked up his briefcase. His expression didn't change. It was beginning to show, just a second, just a short nod before stepping into the car and driving away. Michael avoided eye contact and focused on stirring sugar into his coffee. Michael gave a short shrug. Michael paused for a second. Michael was standing in the kitchen, pouring himself coffee before work. Mostly he listened while Victoria talked, not the arguments. Nervous look on Michael's face, not the phone calls, pressure, secrets, something bigger than him. Something didn't feel right. Something was happening inside that house. Sometimes the most beautiful structures hid the deepest cracks. The expensive appliances. The front door closed behind him. The kind of tension that only appeared when something important was at risk. The man left without shaking hands. The man opened it, flipped through a few pages, then closed it again. The man spoke very little. The next morning, Daniel decided to ask Michael about it. The polished marble counters, the spotless floors, then he left. Quietly in the living room for nearly an hour. Victoria opened it quickly and ushered him inside. When the meeting ended, Victoria walked him to the door. The next humiliation came during breakfast. It was early. The house was still quiet, the pale morning light slipping through the large kitchen windows. For once, Daniel had woken up feeling slightly peaceful. The night had been calm, and for a brief moment he thought maybe the tension in the house had softened. He walked slowly into the kitchen. Michael was already there, sitting at the island with his phone in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. He looked half awake, scrolling through emails while occasionally taking a sip. "Morning," Daniel said gently. Michael glanced up. "Oh, morning, Dad." Daniel nodded and moved toward the counter. He had been careful lately. Careful about the rules. Careful about the kitchen. Careful about touching things that might belong to Victoria. But the house had several coffee machines, and one sat neatly on the counter beside the sink. It looked simple enough. Daniel had used coffee machines his entire life. He placed a mug underneath and pressed a button. The machine hummed quietly as it began brewing. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then Victoria entered the kitchen. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile floor. She stopped when she saw Daniel standing at the counter. Her eyes moved from him to the coffee machine. Her expression changed instantly. "Daniel?" Her voice cut through the quiet room. Daniel turned. "Yes." Victoria walked quickly toward the counter. "Please don't touch things you don't understand." The words came out sharp and impatient. Michael looked up from his phone but didn't say anything. Daniel glanced down at the cup as the machine finished pouring the coffee. "I was just making coffee," he said calmly. Victoria shook her head. "You can't just press random buttons on equipment like that." Daniel looked at the machine again. It seemed fairly simple. Victoria crossed her arms. "These machines cost more than your entire old kitchen." The words hung in the air, heavy, unnecessary. Michael shifted slightly in his seat but remained silent. The coffee machine gave a soft beep, signaling it had finished. No one moved. Silence filled the room. Daniel slowly reached forward and picked up the mug. The warmth spread through his hands. For a moment, he simply stood there, staring into the dark surface of the coffee. Then he slowly put the cup back down on the counter. For the first time, he looked directly at Victoria. Not angry, not defensive, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment that comes from finally understanding something you had hoped wasn't true. Victoria met his gaze for a second. Then she rolled her eyes. "Honestly, Michael," she said, turning slightly toward her husband, "this is exactly what I was worried about." Michael rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Victoria," he started quietly, but he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't defend Daniel. He didn't challenge her. He simply stopped talking. The moment passed. Daniel gave a small nod, as if acknowledging something only he could see. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Victoria didn't respond. She walked to the counter and began adjusting the machine, wiping it carefully with a cloth as if correcting some invisible damage. Daniel stepped away. He didn't take the coffee. He didn't say anything else. He simply turned and walked out of the kitchen. His footsteps were slow and steady as he moved down the hallway. Behind him, the kitchen returned to its normal sounds. Cups clinking, cabinets opening, Victoria speaking softly to Michael about something else entirely. By the time Daniel reached his small room, the conversation had already moved on. He closed the door behind him. The room felt the same as always. Small, quiet, bare. Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed. For a long time, he didn't move. He thought about the dinner party. The laughter, the whispers, the late-night arguments, the man in the suit, the word mistakes, and now the coffee machine. Small things, but together they had formed something heavier, something undeniable. Daniel leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. For weeks, he had tried to convince himself that everything would settle down, that Victoria simply needed time, that Michael would eventually speak up, that the house would begin to feel like a home again. But something had shifted this morning, something quiet, something final. Daniel lifted his head and looked toward the closed door. For the first time since arriving in the house, he no longer felt like a guest. He felt like a man who had overstayed his welcome. And that realization carried an unexpected clarity. Daniel slowly stood up and looked around the small room. The single drawer, the narrow bed, the suitcase still tucked against the wall. Everything he owned in this house could be packed in minutes. He sat back down again, calmer now. But this time, something inside him had changed. The quiet patience that had kept him silent for weeks was beginning to fade, and in its place, something stronger was starting to rise. Late that night, Daniel walked past the hallway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Most of the lights were off, leaving only a faint glow from the small lamp inside Victoria's office. As Daniel passed the door, he heard voices. Victoria's voice. The door was slightly open. Victoria was speaking to someone on the phone. Her voice was sharp, frustrated, angry. "I told you already, this situation is getting dangerous." Daniel paused. He shouldn't listen, he knew that. But something made him stay, a feeling he couldn't explain. Victoria continued, "Michael is too soft to handle this." There was a long silence as the person on the other end spoke. Daniel couldn't hear their voice. Then came the words that would change everything. Victoria lowered her voice and said slowly, "We need to get rid of him before he ruins everything." Daniel froze. His heart started beating faster. Was she talking about him? The call ended. The room went silent. Daniel quietly stepped back into the darkness of the hallway. For the first time since moving into that house, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't just unwanted, he was a problem. And Victoria Harper was planning to solve it. Daniel sat alone in his small room, staring at the photograph of his late wife, whispering quietly, "Mary, I think I made a terrible mistake coming here." But deep down, he also knew something else. Victoria was hiding something big. And now Daniel Harper intended to find out exactly what it was, no matter the cost.